There are moments in television history when a performance feels larger than the stage it happens on, and Lucy Thomas's early appearance on The Voice Kids UK in 2018 was one of those rare instances. She was a soft-spoken teenager from Wigan, England, appearing almost unassuming under the bright studio lights, yet carrying a voice that seemed to belong to something far beyond her age. What made her stand out was not volume or theatricality, but emotional clarity, an ability to make every note feel intentional and deeply felt. When she began singing, the atmosphere in the room shifted almost immediately. The performance was not framed as a spectacle but as something intimate, as if time itself had slowed to listen. Coaches turned their chairs not in routine approval, but in visible disbelief. The audience, too, reacted with a kind of stunned silence before erupting into applause. In that moment, Lucy was no longer just a contestant. She became a symbol of unpolished authenticity in a world often shaped by production and expectation. Yet, even as the applause echoed, there was no sense that she fully belonged to the industry that had just discovered her. Instead, it felt like the beginning of a path she had not yet chosen but was already being pulled into. The performance that stopped the room. Lucy's audition performance, particularly her rendition of Moon River, became the defining moment that introduced her to the wider public. The song itself is delicate and nostalgic, but through her voice it gained an almost haunting intimacy. She did not attempt to overpower the melody. Instead, she allowed it to unfold naturally, shaping each phrase with careful restraint. This approach created a sense of emotional honesty that resonated deeply with both the live audience and viewers at home. The judges reacted not with scripted enthusiasm, but with genuine surprise, exchanging glances that suggested they had witnessed something unexpected. Within hours of broadcast, clips of her performance spread rapidly across social media platforms, with viewers describing it as moving, pure, and unusually mature for someone so young. What made the moment particularly striking was its simplicity. There were no elaborate arrangements or dramatic staging, only a voice carrying emotion with quiet precision. It was this simplicity that gave the performance its strength, allowing listeners to project their own feelings onto the music. For many, it was the first time a talent show performance felt less like competition and more like an artistic revelation, marking Lucy as someone to watch closely in the unfolding season. Growth under the spotlight of competition. After her audition success, Lucy chose to join Danny Jones's team, beginning a structured journey through the competition that would test not only her vocal ability but also her emotional resilience. Under his mentorship, she approached each rehearsal with unusual discipline for her age, often arriving early and preparing meticulously. Her performances in the battle rounds revealed a willingness to experiment while still maintaining her signature emotional control. Songs that demanded power or theatrical energy were reinterpreted through her restrained, expressive style, which stood out against more conventional approaches from other contestants. Her ability to sustain emotional depth without vocal excess became a defining trait, earning praise from both mentors and viewers. As she advanced into the semi-finals, pressure naturally increased, but she continued to present herself with quiet focus rather than visible stress. Behind the scenes, she was described as respectful, thoughtful, and deeply engaged with her craft, often studying feedback carefully and applying it with precision. Yet, even as her confidence grew on stage, there remained an underlying sense that she was still processing the intensity of public attention. The competition became less about winning and more about understanding who she was as an emerging artist, the moment of departure and emotional weight. When Lucy was eliminated in the semi-finals, the reaction from viewers was immediate and emotional. Many expected her to reach the final stage, and her departure created a noticeable sense of disappointment across the audience. However, what stood out most was not frustration, but empathy. Her performances had built a strong emotional connection with viewers, making her exit feel personal to many who had followed her journey. Backstage, the moment was quieter than expected. Rather than dramatic reaction, there was a sense of reflection as she embraced her family and processed the experience with maturity beyond her years. The competition had given her visibility, but it also introduced her to the complexities of public expectation. For the first time, she was no longer just singing for enjoyment or improvement, she was singing under the weight of anticipation. That transition marked an important emotional turning point. While the show had ended for her, it also revealed something important. Her identity as an artist was not dependent on winning. Instead, it was rooted in connection, expression, and the ability to move people, regardless of competition results. That realization quietly shaped everything that followed, returning home to a changed reality. After her appearance on television, Lucy returned to Wigan to a life that was no longer ordinary in the same way. She was still a teenager attending school, but her experience had shifted her into a space where recognition followed her beyond the stage. Messages from viewers, media attention, and growing online visibility created a sudden contrast between her private life and public identity. While many celebrated her talent, others projected expectations that were difficult for someone her age to carry. Her family became an essential grounding force, especially her mother, who helped manage the increasing attention and shield her from overwhelming demands. Despite the admiration, Lucy began to feel the pressure of being constantly observed and evaluated. Even simple social media posts were met with analysis and commentary, which made her hesitant to share openly. Rather than pursuing immediate opportunities or capitalizing on fame, she chose a quieter path, focusing on school, practice, and personal development. This decision confused some observers who expected rapid career progression, but for Lucy, it was a necessary step in maintaining emotional balance. The silence that followed her television appearance was not absence, but adjustment, a gradual effort to reconnect with herself outside of public expectation, building identity beyond expectation. During her time away from the spotlight, Lucy began developing a deeper understanding of music beyond performance. She spent long hours practicing not for audiences, but for herself, experimenting with phrasing, tone, and emotional delivery. This period became less about external validation and more about internal exploration. She also began writing lyrics privately, using journals as a space to process emotions related to pressure, identity, and growth. These writings were not initially intended for publication, but became an important outlet for expression. Family support played a significant role in this phase, particularly through informal musical moments shared with her sister, where singing became a way to reconnect with normalcy. Instead of focusing on career advancement, Lucy concentrated on learning how music worked at a structural level, showing curiosity about production and interpretation. This approach set her apart from many young performers who often rely solely on vocal talent. For her, the goal was not just to sing well, but to understand music fully. This mindset slowly shaped a more grounded artistic identity, one that valued authenticity over visibility. It was a formative period that quietly prepared her for the next stage of her career without the pressure of constant public attention. The return through recorded music. Lucy's return to the music world came not through television but through recorded work. Her debut album marked a transition from contestant to independent artist, allowing her to explore repertoire at her own pace. The project emphasized classical crossover arrangements, highlighting her vocal clarity and emotional restraint rather than dramatic vocal displays. Songs were selected not for trend appeal but for emotional resonance, reflecting her preference for sincerity over spectacle. The response was unexpectedly positive, particularly among listeners who appreciated subtlety in vocal performance. Rather than pursuing aggressive promotion, she treated the process as a learning experience, focusing on studio techniques and artistic collaboration. Her second album expanded this approach and gained wider attention, especially when one of her interpretations gained viral popularity online. This moment introduced her to a global audience and reinforced her presence as a distinctive voice in contemporary classical-influenced music. However, with growing recognition came increased workload and recording demands, which she managed with discipline. Despite success, she remained cautious about overstretching herself, maintaining a careful balance between artistic ambition and personal well-being. This phase established her as a consistent recording artist rather than a fleeting television discovery. Strain behind the growing success. As Lucy continued recording and performing, the demands on her voice began to increase significantly. The repetition of studio sessions, combined with her personal perfectionism, led to periods of vocal strain that were not immediately visible to the public. She often pushed herself to refine recordings beyond what was necessary, driven by a desire for emotional precision. While this dedication contributed to the quality of her work, it also placed stress on her instrument. Over time, this began to affect her confidence, as she noticed subtle changes in her vocal comfort. Despite these challenges, she continued working, motivated by a strong sense of responsibility toward her craft. The release of subsequent albums reflected both artistic maturity and emotional depth, but also hinted at the toll of sustained effort. Listeners began to notice a shift in tone, interpreting it as growth, while in reality, it also reflected physical and emotional strain. This period became a quiet struggle between maintaining artistic output and preserving vocal health. It marked one of the most difficult phases of her early career, where success and pressure existed side by side in an increasingly delicate balance. Reinvention and stage expansion. Following this challenging period, Lucy gradually rebuilt her vocal strength and artistic direction. Her later work showed renewed stability and confidence, with performances that balanced emotional sensitivity and technical control. Collaborations with her sister added a new dimension to her career, as their combined voices created harmonies that resonated widely with audiences. These performances gained significant online attention, further expanding her reach. Eventually, she transitioned into live theatrical performance, marking her entry into the West End stage. This shift represented a major step forward, moving from recorded music into full-scale live production. The experience required not only vocal ability, but also stage presence, endurance, and adaptability. Although initially intimidating, she approached it with determination, treating it as another form of learning. Critical response to her performance was positive, noting her ability to convey emotion in a live theatrical environment. This stage of her career demonstrated her versatility and willingness to step beyond familiar boundaries, reinforcing her identity as a multi-dimensional performer rather than a single-genre artist, a legacy built on quiet strength. By the mid-2020s, Lucy Thomas had established herself as an artist defined not by controversy or spectacle, but by consistency and emotional authenticity. Her influence extended beyond music into advocacy work, particularly in areas related to youth well-being and resilience. She used her experiences to connect with young audiences facing pressure, emphasizing the importance of self-understanding over external validation. Despite growing recognition, she maintained a private lifestyle, continuing to live in her hometown and prioritizing family stability. Her career trajectory stood out in an industry often driven by rapid visibility and constant reinvention. Instead, she chose a slower, more deliberate path, allowing her work to develop organically over time. This approach earned her respect among fans who valued sincerity over trend-driven fame. Her journey illustrated that success does not always require constant exposure, but can also be built through patience, discipline, and emotional honesty. Over time, she became known not just for her voice, but for the values reflected in her choices as an artist. Conclusion of a continuing journey. Lucy Thomas's story is not one of disappearance, but of transformation. What began as a striking television moment evolved into a carefully shaped artistic journey defined by growth, reflection, and resilience. Her early exposure to fame introduced both opportunity and pressure, yet she chose a path that prioritized stability over constant visibility. Through recording, performance, and personal development, she gradually built a career rooted in authenticity rather than expectation. While public attention often focuses on breakthrough moments, her story demonstrates that long-term artistry is shaped in quieter spaces through practice, recovery, and self-discovery. Today, she represents a form of success that is measured not only in popularity, but in artistic integrity and emotional connection. Her journey continues, shaped by both experience and intention, suggesting that her most meaningful work may still lie ahead rather than behind her.